Together, we are going to review the book Facing Codependence, what it is, where it comes from, and how it sabotages our lives, authored by Pia Mellody. The following presentation features topics such as child abuse and other sensitive subjects. The viewer is not obligated to view this presentation and is advised to seek help from licensed counselors for guidance through mental health challenges. The first part of this review will show how the author frames codependence as a disease requiring competent intervention. Pia Mellody is a mental health counselor for The Meadows, a drug and trauma rehab center in Wickenburg, Arizona. In 1977, she discovered both she and her patients shared similar symptoms to a then unidentified condition. Her colleagues encouraged her to pursue this further, identify what it is, and find a treatment. After more than a decade of work in the field, Mellody established a working model that has helped thousands become more functionally independent, in some cases, breaking an endless generational cycle of abusive and dysfunctional behaviors. Mellody identified the condition with an emerging concept called codependence, now called codependency, which had been sparsely circulating in academic literature throughout the 1980s. In 1989, she published Facing Codependence and was the first to suggest a correlation between codependence and childhood abuse. Abuse in this book broadly encapsulates all less than nurturing parenting practices. Mellody frames codependence as a disease, like alcoholism or substance abuse. She talks about interventions similar to Alcoholics Anonymous, and even introduces a then emerging group called Codependence Anonymous. She identifies 5 core symptoms: difficulty in having appropriate self-esteem, setting functional boundaries, owning reality, taking care of one's own adult needs and wants, and experiencing reality in moderation. The key being moderation. Mellody suggests that codependence is not about being normal versus being not normal. It is about whether we are being functional versus dysfunctional. I notice that she frames behaviors along a spectrum of moderation, with polar opposite extreme behaviors existing at both ends of the spectrum. As she explains, quote, "People who swing to a polar opposite of the dysfunctional behavior to find recovery are invariably disappointed. This is because the opposite of dysfunctional behavior is more dysfunctional behavior, and that's not recovery. Functional behavior is somewhere near the center, between 2 extremes." End quote. Mellody offers a lot of personal examples in her book. One in particular I wanted to share. So basically, she and her husband both work in the same field. They live together, obviously, and she, I guess, would leave too many lights on in the house. He asked her not to do that, and so she left from leaving too many lights on to leaving most off, to the point where she's like in the bathroom, using the bathroom with the light off in the bathroom and throughout the hallway, most of the house. He eventually finds her and asks her what's going on here, and she says, well, you didn't want me to leave on so many lights on, so basically this is my solution to that. And he said something to her that was very important. He said, "Pia, you gotta learn how to live in moderation." And she took that to heart, except she didn't really know how to. She's so used to going from one extreme to the next, so she counted all the lights in the house, divided by 3, figured 1/3 is a good number of lights to leave on. Next time he brought up the subject, she said, "Look, buddy, this is what I did, counted all the lights, divide by 3, leave that number on." Boom. That, to me, that's moderation. And he had nothing else to say to that. So eventually she learned, to comfortably identify what moderation looks like, but this just serves to show it's difficult for most codependents to grasp. She shows that codependence in adulthood derives from 5 underdeveloped characteristics from childhood. These attributes are important to note because by adult caregivers not properly nurturing these 5 characteristics, their children will likely develop codependent symptoms. Let us explore these 5 characteristics so we can understand how the author says they produce dysfunctional and codependent adults if not properly facilitated during childhood. First, children are valuable merely for being born. They don't have to do anything to have worth in the family. At the beginning of their lives, children have no self-concept at all and are like blank slates. They absorb the esteem that parents have for them, and this internalized esteem from parents becomes the basis of self-esteem. Second, children do not have fully developed boundary systems. They therefore rely on their caregivers to help them establish and develop their own boundaries. It is the responsibility of adult-child caregivers to protect their children from the abusive actions perpetrated by others as the children develop their own boundary systems during these years. Third, everybody is imperfect, children more so than adults. Children do not know how to deal with their own imperfections. They require understanding caregivers who are patient with these imperfections. Fourth, children have to rely on other people to get their primary survival needs met. Examples include food, shelter, clothing, medical and dental care, information, and guidance. As children grow older, their caregivers teach them how to meet these needs for themselves. Finally, a child is going to act like a child. It therefore stands to reason that acting like a child is an inherent feature of childhood. Functional caregivers know which behaviors are appropriate for each age level. They don't demand that children act more mature for their age or indulge behaviors more suitable for younger age groups. Adults facilitating these 5 natural characteristics of children into their adulthood is called nurturing behavior. When caregivers do not, for whatever reason, properly facilitate these attributes into adulthood, it is less than nurturing behavior, or abuse. In the book, Mellody uses these terms interchangeably. With these 5 natural characteristics in mind, we can begin to see how they can become codependent traits in adulthood, if not properly facilitated during childhood. This chart shows how less than nurturing caregiving can take a natural childhood trait, warp it into a dysfunctional survival trait, and thus produce a core symptom of adulthood codependence. For instance, the natural vulnerability of children can be taken and made into people who are either too vulnerable or, believing the opposite extreme, that they're invulnerable. This makes it difficult for them to establish functional boundaries in adulthood. A child's natural dependency can be taken and made into either being too dependent or anti-dependent, being needless and wantless, all this leading to difficulty in taking care of one's own needs and wants as an adult. In conclusion, we'll see how Mellody's presentation of codependency contributes to the Osiris core value of promoting individual sovereignty. Interdependent adults are those who exhibit functional behaviors in moderation, recruiting the resources from others at appropriate times in proper circumstances to meet their own adult survival needs. Such adults are less reliant on government to meet these needs, in contrast to codependent adults who are more inappropriately reliant on others, and therefore are more inclined to rely on the government to supply their survival needs. A society consisting mostly of these codependent adults eventuates into one that is more reliant upon the state. A society consisting mostly of interdependent adults is one that dismisses the need for an ever-expanding bureaucracy, federal programs, and national debt. Some people believe that statism is the way to go, that more government control over the individual's survival requirements is more humane, less risky, and more progressive. Some people will always love tyranny.